Just real quick, dealing with difficult people, I also call this presentation dealing with the jerks at work. And this is probably one of our biggest sellers because we all know people that work in our personal lives or whatever that sometimes can be a little bit difficult to be around and to negotiate and communicate with. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then talk a little bit about the presentation and then go through a few examples. So just to get a little idea kind of where I come from. I've been in private practice in Rockford for, almost 35 years. I see adolescents and couples and families treat depression and anxiety. I owned and operated an outpatient substance abuse. I was a clinical director of an outpatient program. I got involved with employee assistance programs many, many years ago and really kind of enjoyed taking a look at business relationships. And, I was a supervisor at one point myself and immediately went into private practice working for myself. I liked to be and didn't like supervising people because they were 15 overeducated therapists that knew everything and didn't mind sharing it with me. So looking back on that, what I found is I didn't apply what I knew. And so I'm going to go over a little bit of that to you today. I also have been involved in alternative dispute resolution processes. I've written a couple of books. We'll talk a little bit about that. I've done divorce mediation. You talk about people at their worst. In Boone and Winnebago County, the program started, good God, about 25 years ago, where couples were forced or mandated to see somebody like me for 3 hours that were going through dispute over custody or whatever with their children in a divorce. And then we had 3 hours to see if we couldn't help them figure out how to raise their children for the rest of their lives. And, we were successful about 70 to 80% of the time. And the mediation training was probably one of the best trainings I ever had, in that what it talked about is how do you solve problems in an ongoing relationship that does no damage to the relationship and maybe improves it. I saw that with people at their worst, in divorces and people trying to figure out what's in the best interest of their children can be very difficult, but people can do it. I'm also author of a book called After 40 Years in Therapy, What Have I Learned? We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, like I say. I've been in private practice since 1983. Talk about starting a small business. I did that when Rockford had the highest unemployment of any city in the nation. 1 in 4 people in Rockford didn't have a job. And I started my business then. Thank God I was a little naive, but it worked out. And so even in the middle of a pandemic, can you start a business? You bet you can. There's always room for talented people. I do some consulting and training for business and industry, also for those psychologists, counselors, and social workers that want to expand the private practice. And I've been involved with the Illinois State Mental Health Counselors Association and the Illinois Counseling Association, board member, and doing those kinds of things. So let's go ahead and kind of move it on. Everything I'm going to talk about today is contained in these 2 books. The first one, Harnessing the Power of Conflict, that was authored by myself and Mike Mastriani. And then I kind of condensed it. There's a series of those books into After 40 Years in Therapy, What Have I Learned? The green book is out of print at this point. If anybody's interested, the After 40 Years is available on my website. I'll give you that. It's also on Amazon. So really what the book talks about, and what I would like to talk about today is, how do we understand each other? There's a lot of theories in psychology that explain why we do and what we do. Some of them, I don't get. I don't think they're that applicable. But there's one called cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT. You can Google that. You'll find a lot of information. And so that's what I've practiced over all these years, and that's what I've used in business and industry. Because you take a look at work groups, they're nothing but big old families, and they suffer from the same pathology. They suffer from the same difficulties that families do. So you apply what you know about family therapy to business and industry. So let me go on here just a little bit. One of the things that we stumbled on many years ago in working with industry was What we found was that the quality or the product or service that's delivered is directly dependent on the quality of the working relationships. And stop to think about how true that is. Any place that you've worked or your own business, if everybody's not getting along well, it makes, delivering a quality service or product difficult. And so, well, then what deals with those relationships? Well, it's kind of common sense. It's communication. The quality of the working relationships is directly dependent on how well the work group communicates and functions and how they see things. So, but as a business owner, as a spouse, as a parent, it's good to have some kind of idea about how we do what we do and, what we can do about it. What makes people feel and think the way they do, what makes people behave the way they do. So I'm going to go over that a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit about applications. So as we're talking about earlier, if you have questions as it comes up, please put them into the chat box. Otherwise, we'll have time at the end to go over them. So anytime we're taking a look at changing, whether it's good change or bad change, what I understand, it's very stressful to win the lottery. I'd like to try that. I think I could handle that kind of stress, but even good change at work, right, or bad changes at work or at home, whatever, throws us into what we call the misery zone. So if we're trying to go from the old way of doing something to the new way, positive or negative, we go through the misery zone. That's when people call my office and say, hey, Norm, I need some help, or I need counseling, or a company will call and say, we're trying to implement some changes here. But man, the employees are just not getting with it, because when you do this, what we find is you hit this misery zone and you can see all the things in there. So if you're trying to make some changes at work or in yourself or your family, you hit this misery zone. And what most of us do when we hit anger, frustration, fear, stress, blame, silent treatment, whatever, what do? We try to go back to the old way, right? If this is where I go, then how do I get to the new way? You got to go through this. I used to tell parents when I'd be treating, adolescents, that if you're trying to change some of Johnny's behavior and you lay down the law or you implement a new policy at work, most people don't like that. And so, it puts them into that misery zone. So we try harder to get it back the old way. The best analogy I can give you, if you put your money in a soda or a pop machine and you don't get your money back or the soda, what do? If you're honest, you shake the machine, don't you? You kick it. And if you don't, you escalate your behavior. So when, you implement a change and people react that way, I always say you're making a difference because you're halfway there. If people are having some difficulty with it, they realize that things are different. Now you've got to be able to be consistent. And if you can manage the misery zone, more times than not, people will pop over to the new way. So, it's kind of like if I go home tonight and actually I am home, but let's say I leave and I come back, right? This is Zoom. So I come home tonight and I tell my spouse, I've been thinking all day, here's 15 things I really need to have you do differently. What kind of reaction do you think I'm going to get? I'm sure she's going to go, wow, Norm, sit down. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to talk about that. Right? I'm going to get the fear, frustration, anger, right? If you know Heidi, I get the silent treatment. Don't tell her I said that. Or she's going to say, you got 15 things I need to do? I got 25 for you, right? And so that's what makes this thing difficult. But we got to go through there in order for change to occur. So let's talk about how people change, all right? There's two ways to change. Either we change from the outside in, or we change from the inside out. Most of us are very familiar with outside in change. This is what most Fortune 500 companies do. This is kind of what we're used to. At work, you reward an employee for a job well done. They're going to work harder. You praise people, or you just finally say, this is the way we're going to do things from, here on out. And it works, but it doesn't last. You get some changes, but you don't get commitments, because changing from the outside in, it reminds me of the big deal these days is anger management classes, right? You send people for anger management. I always wonder, why in the hell do you want to manage it? Wouldn't you want to get rid of it? You know, I can count to 10, I can snap a rubber band, I can turn around to try to get my anger down, but maybe I don't need to get that angry, right? You know, outside in change. It's just like at a company. You know, a company might say, you know, oh, geez, morale sucks. So let's think about giving people, you know, a 2% increase. Well, if I think the place sucks and I get a 2% increase, how am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling richer at the place that sucks. Doesn't change how I look at it, right? Or maybe it's, you know, I get to be employee of the month. So I get to park closer to the building at the place that sucks. And what am I thinking? Well, I'm thinking now I get to the place that sucks quicker. You know, I'm not so sure that's what you want. Outside in doesn't necessarily change the way that we look at it. You know, you get compliance, but you don't get commitment. You know, you get behavior. It is kind of like, you know, doing those kinds of things without trying to change the thinking part. So can you do it? Yeah, but really to me, it doesn't last. What I really prefer to do is take a look at changing from the inside out. So when we take a look at doing that, really, this is what cognitive behavioral therapy is all about. You see the ads all over the place now for, I think it's Noom or whatever, the weight loss app, and they talk about using psychology. What's cognitive behavioral therapy? And very simply stated, it says the way in which I think causes my feelings and my behavior. You know, feelings and behavior are important, but they're side effects about how I see the world. So the best way I can try to explain this to you is do a kind of a compare and contrast thing. So most of us, if we took a psychology class in high school or college or whatever, you're familiar with some stimulus response, right? In the face of a certain stimulus, you elicit a certain response. You know, and most of us believe that to be true. In our personal lives, if we ever said, "You make me so angry," or, you know, "You treat me like that and I just feel horrible," somehow implying that somebody's doing something to us against our will. And, you know, we apply this to adult relationships. We see that something happens and we have a response. But you got to stop and think about it. You can have the same stimulus or thing that happens at work or at home or your community. Or good Lord, you know, take a look at, you know, the shootings that have happened recently in the pandemic. You know, that's a stimulus. How do we respond to that? There's all sorts of different responses, right? About how we take a look at that. So here's a good way to take a look at it. Something can happen and we can respond in a group, in a culture, at work, right? The same thing can happen at work, but we get a variety of different responses. Why is that? You know, if the same thing happens, we get a variety of different responses. Why is that? Think about a change at work, for example. Some people, right, never break stride. They keep right on moving, man. They just keep, you know, they incorporate it right on in. Other people at work grind to a halt. You know, oh my God, I can't believe they're making this change. Other people that have been there for a long time say, they tried this 10 years ago. You know, hang on, this too shall pass, right? So you have the same thing, but you get a variety of different responses. Again, why is that? Families that maybe have a traumatic event happen. Why do some people seem to handle that okay? Why do some people, you know, retreat or deny? Well, the best way I can explain it is kind of this ABC model. So A is the activating event, or that's the stimulus. And the response to those events or stimuli are emotions and feelings. You know, something happens, right? I feel a certain way, and then once we feel, that kind of drives our behavior. So you get an idea about how this works. Example might be, you win $1 million in the Illinois State Lottery, or 100 million. Take a stab about how you might feel. I know everybody's got their mute buttons on, but think about it, right? You're feeling pretty good, aren't you? So the activating event is I win $100 million. I feel pretty good about my bad self. I'm quitting, resigning my job. I'm going to go on into retirement or do whatever, right? You know, something happens, I feel a certain way, and then I behave accordingly. But again, when things happen at work, community, society, we can have a lot of different. Take a look at our political system, how polarized that is. Same things are going on in the United States, but we got a lot of different ways of looking at this stuff, right? And how we feel about it then changes our behavior. So what you see here is, you see I left the B part out. So when something happens, what explains the different feelings and behavior, okay? So there's something that happens there in the middle. B here, we call it perceptions, how we look at the world. It's how we evaluate the events that happen in our life. It's what we tell ourselves. So it's not so much the events in our life that cause our feelings and our behavior, it's how we see it, okay? And how we see it, you know, I wouldn't be in a psychology field if I didn't pick on childhood or whatever, right? So, you know, it's how we grew up, it's our ethnicity, it's our gender, it's life experiences. All that stuff molds and shapes the way in which we look at the world. It's kind of like a lens in my glasses, so to speak. So everything that happens gets filtered through that, right? When you stop to think about it, you know, the events that happen in my life, your life, a lot of times we can't do anything about it. Doesn't mean that I'm left with lousy feelings and destructive behavior, because what I control 100% of the time sits right there in the middle. The perceptions and my belief system is another good way to call it. Excuse me. It's how I evaluate it. What do I say to myself? That's what causes the feelings and the behavior. So a lot of times we have more power than what we think. You know, people that have anxiety, it's not so much what goes on in their life that causes the anxiety, it's how they interpret it. Just real quick, think of fear of flying, for example. That's getting on an airplane. Why do some people get anxious about it, right? The airplane has no value, I can tell you that. It's what you tell yourself, right? I'm in here, I'm packed in here like sardines, I'm in a silver death tube, this thing's gonna crash, and you know. So you start running that stuff through your head, how do you expect to feel? You know, calm and relaxed? That's why the bars are open in airports almost 24 hours a day. So you can treat yourself. But you see what I'm saying? So that's what we need to, you know, feelings and behavior are important, but they're side effects, they're byproducts. If we spend all our time in feelings and behavior, we never get to what causes them. You know, if people will say, you know, can you change a corporate culture? Sure. What's a corporate culture? A shared set of beliefs, isn't it? What's a society? Shared set of perceptions. So really, if we want to change culture, if we want to change ourselves, our families, whatever, our relationships at work, we need to deal with the perceptions. And while we acknowledge the feelings and the behavior, that's the root. You know, you control 100% of the time what happens in the B part. You control what goes on in your life about 20%. But when I'm feeling lousy, right, or I'm grouchy or I'm difficult to get along with, what do I blame it on? What's going on in my life, don't I? Right? Rather than going, maybe I need to take a look at myself. So let's take a look a little bit more about kind of how this works. Let's get an example. Let's take a work example. So let's say the boss says to you, I want to see you in my office pronto. So how would you feel? Guess. Your boss says, I want to see you right away. Nervous, anxious, maybe afraid. It's not so much the boss's request, it's what you tell yourself, right? Think about it. What did I do wrong? She's obviously not happy with something I said. I hope she doesn't eat me alive or shreds. So I'm anxious about going in there, and I'm avoidant or I'm backpedaling, right? I'm concerned. But yeah, again, the boss's request has little or no value until you give it value. Here's another example. The boss's request to come to my office. You know, I'm angry, I'm pissed, I'm resentful, so I'm aggressive, right? I am the same thing. Well, because I tell myself I shouldn't be treated this way. You know, who the hell does she think she is? You know, I got better things to do. I'm tired of her attitude, right? If that's the tape that's running through your head, how do you expect to feel? Anger and resentment. Or, and I'm sure most of us don't go here, but it is a possibility. You know, I think, whoa, something must be up. I'm glad she wants to talk about it. You know, I'm sure there must be some kind of misunderstanding or something. So I'm going to go in kind of neutral, go into calm or rational. And what's my behavior? I'm problem solving, right? You see the difference, right? About how that works. So you have a lot more control than you think you do. Because in counseling, you know, I can't change people's, you know, events that happen in their life. What counselors and psychologists and therapists do is help you reinterpret it, right? If you stop to think about it, most people, when I'm really that upset, means I got to really, you know, extreme stuff going on in my head. Need to be able to bring that down and make it reality oriented, right? So let's take a little bit more about how that works. So if you can buy for me with a minute, how I see things causes my feelings and my behavior. What happens if how I see things is off a little bit? What happens if it's skewed? Okay, that means everything that comes through that is going to be equally skewed. Now, I don't want anybody here on this webinar thinking, oh, Norm just wants us to envision ourselves as little flowers waiting to bloom and everything's going to be fine. And no, you know, that art of positive thinking. I call that the art of positively lying to yourself, right? What we're talking about doing is seeing things reality-based for what they are, okay? It's like the half a glass of water thing. You ever remember the old Peace Corps ad? Anyone here old enough besides Mike and myself to remember the old Peace Corps ad, right? About, you know, we want people, you know, is it half a glass of water, half full, or is it half empty? Well, I don't know about you, but to me, it's half a glass of water. That's all it is. It has no value until you give it value. You can say, hey, it's a beautiful day. My half a glass of water is half full. Or you can go, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's half gone. Or you can say, if you've ever been through downsizing, you can say, you know what? I think we got twice as much glass as we need here. Old joke, but you see what I'm saying, okay? All right, get twice as much glass. Never mind. So you see what I'm talking about. So it gives you some real world examples, but research has shown that people have perception errors. You remember in that B part that I'm talking about. How I see the world influences my feelings and my behavior. This is stuff that all of us are guilty of, all right? This is going to make you fun at parties because now you're going to know why people do and feel and think the way they do by looking at these 4 areas. We'll just go over them real briefly. Number 1 is we have a tendency when things happen to polarize, okay? So when something happens, it's either good or bad, right? You stop to think about it. When you go home tonight or, you know, run into your partner and someone says, how was your day? What are your choices? It's usually good or bad, right? All right, so let's see, it wasn't good. It must have been bad by default. You know, I see things in the polarities. And I offer to you today, the polarities rarely happen unless we see it that way, right? You know, that means if your day is either good or bad, before you get up tomorrow, before you even open your eyes, you have a 50% chance of having a rotten day because you only have 2 choices, right? Me, when I wake up tomorrow, I might like 10 choices for my day. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be wonderful. It could be mildly disappointing, it could be subpar, it could be average. See what I'm saying? You know, so another good example is what's the best possible thing to happen today? I know you're all muted, so I'll give you the answer. So the best possible thing to me will be world peace, right? I'm a therapist, so everybody gets along. That'd be great. What's the worst possible thing? To me is getting nuked. Okay, anything short of being nuked is going to be inconvenient. All right. So what are the chances of world peace or being nuked? What are the chances of those happening today? 4th quarter of 2021, next week. Pretty rare, right? Unless we see it that way, right? So sometimes when people have those mood swings, you know, their thought swings. You know, if you've ever worked with somebody or been in a relationship with somebody that's on an emotional roller coaster, you know what? You get a chance to go on the ride for free, right? Way up, way down, oh my God, right? You know, I raised a daughter. I've got the bumper stickers, this daughter survivor on it. You know, Matt would call her up and ask her out and she was very pleasant. And then, you know, something would happen and then she's lurking behind the furniture. And, you know, we throw raw meat in her room, see what kind of mood she was in. She may be on this, on this webinar. We're going to look at it later. She's HR director for a huge company. So anyway, yeah, you see what I'm saying? It's polarities. Those things do happen, but they don't happen with the regularity that we see them. You know, when something happens in our society, we go right to the polarities. You know, take a look at the politics, you know, mass shooting, everybody's stunned, other people going, oh my God, they're going to use this as a way to take our guns away. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know, is there some middle ground here? Is there something here in the middle? Yeah, most of life happens in the middle, but we got to be able to see it that way. A lot of us have a tendency to awfulize. We have a tendency to look on the dark side of things. That's why we used to like shows like Jerry Springer. I think he's still on, right? Cable somewhere. Jerry Springer, Inside Edition, hard copy. We like to know the gunk on people, you know. And when something happens, what's our first thought? It's usually negative. You know, if you think things are awful, horrible, terrible, and catastrophic, how do you expect to feel? Perky? And not going to happen. You're going to feel awful, horrible, terrible, and catastrophic. And you're going to be miserable, and you're going to be miserable to be around. But, you know, where does some of this stuff come from? It comes from childhood, right? We'll just pick on that real quick. Excuse me. So if we're looking at polarization, good or bad, when you were growing up, if it weren't a good little girl or boy, what were your options? Think about it. You're good or bad, right? You're good or naughty, right? How many times your parents ever look at you and go, my, you're awfully mediocre? You know, you're an average kid like that. You know, you either succeeded or you failed, right? So we take that dichotomy with us into our workplace, and we take it into our relationships. Awfulizing, you know, if you got 4 A's and a D on your report card, what'd you all spend dinner talking about? How wonderful you are in the 4 A's? No, we usually, you know, pick on the D, right? We go to what the negative is. You got 4 A's and a D. Why can't we celebrate the A's first? And then we can talk about bringing the D up. But we have a tendency to look to the negative, okay? So we need to be cognizant of that we don't need to go to the awful, okay? We don't need to put a negative spin on it. We need to make sure that it's just reality-based. You know, is this, you know, what just happened a catastrophe, or is it inconvenient, all right? Is this really a horrible event? Because I can think of a lot of things that are horrible, or is this disappointing? You know, when we talk about anger management, primarily with men, right? You know, you need to have other emotions besides anger. I could be disappointed. I could be frustrated. Okay. I could be mildly disappointed. I could, you know, you see what I'm saying? You got options, but if I go right to anger, I'm going to feel that way. I'm going to behave that way. Third one is self-esteem. Most of us, if you could measure our self-esteem like oil in our cars, we're low on the dipstick. Some of us don't have any self-esteem. They don't, you know. So, you know, it gets filtered through that. And, you know, I'm always apologizing at work in a relationship. I'm so sorry. It's kind of that codependent thing. Ooh, you know, did I hurt your feelings? That kind of thing. Or the flip side happens. And these are the people that are chronically getting screwed or getting the short end of the stick. You ever know anybody like that? No matter what happens, it's negative. It would be like, hey, you got, you know, your vacation time approved, you know, a month off. Yeah, except the one day I really wanted. Or boy, you know, you got a 5 or 10% increase. You know, well, it's about time. You know, it would be like if they won the lottery, right? Hey, you won $1 million in the Illinois State Lottery. How does it feel? It's a ripoff. Well, what do you mean it's a ripoff? You only win $750,000. They take $250,000 in taxes right off the top. Bunch of liars, state of Illinois, right? If I had known that, I wouldn't have wasted $1 on the ticket. You know, truth in advertising. Come on. Yeah, we all know people like that. Now you know why, right? It's that self-esteem thing. They're low on self-esteem, and so they overreact. The last one that I'm going to talk about briefly is overgeneralization, which means that we have a tendency, you know, a couple of things happen. Now it's our life script. You know, people say, oh, geez, Norm, I just never get what I want. I said, really? You've never been through the drive-through and you got your order correct, right? Got to happen somewhere. Or, I just don't know what to do. Sure you do. Somehow you got to my office, you got your shoes tied, you can do a lot of things. But when we have that kind of mentality, or people should treat me with respect, respect is also earned. Yeah, people should be given respect, but in order to maintain respect, you got to earn it to keep it there. So you got to think about that. So if I'm overgeneralizing a lot, that keeps me down. Not good. So those are the kind of 4 most critical thinking errors that most people make. So, and you can see this based on people's feelings and their behavior. This gives you clues as to what's going on in their head. You know, therapists aren't psychic, you know, we get our clues from the way people talk to us, you know, and so what we're looking for is what's going on in that perception set, that belief system. Because if we can change that, if we can massage that a little bit, the feelings and the behavior changes, just like dominoes. You ever assumed the negative about somebody and you found out it wasn't true, and then you liked them a little bit more? That person didn't change. Your perception of them changed, right? Because you learned what you were thinking wasn't correct. So This is where you need to be able to get, and this is obviously the crux of what we're talking about here today, is how do I deal with these perception errors, and how do I deal with the feelings and the behavior, okay? Let's take a look at what research has shown us a little bit. So let's take a look what other people have said. Oops, let's go this way. If you take a look at the research, and I'm in the psychology business, so research is pretty important. That this guy Sexton, almost 20 years ago, found that mistaken beliefs and negative thinking can both contribute and maintain to negative behavioral patterns. It almost sounds common sense, doesn't it? Interactions and even mental illness. Some mental illness like anxiety and depression caused from those negative thoughts. So that's what we attempt to do, is try to challenge some of those. Again, is it really horrible or is it inconvenient? Or if it is horrible, let's feel that and let's move on with it. Let's spend our time, feeling those feelings, but we don't want to get stuck there, okay? Same kind of thing with people that we deal with. I love this one, and we'll come back to it in a little bit. Viktor Frankl, I think he was a German psychologist, been around forever. I can't believe this is only 2010. But remember when I was talking about that stimulus response thing, the S and the R and the arrow? This is what he had to say about that. He said, in between the stimulus and the response is a space, okay? And that space is that belief system, those perceptions, right? The B part. And he said, in that space is our power to choose our response. It's a choice. In our response lies our growth and our freedom, okay? To me, if you stop to think about it, that's pretty powerful. So I'm not destined to feel and behave a certain way because of what happens. It's a choice by how I look to interpret it. I'm always a big fan of let's try to fix what bothers me first. If it's a relationship, if it's a job, if it's whatever, can I fix that? If I can't, then maybe, and I want to stay, then maybe what do I need to do to kind of reinterpret that, okay? Make sure that I'm looking at it right. And I think what Frankl said here is extremely important. So with these guys, and of course I had to throw one of my quotes in from the book, right? So, what I have learned and what we have found in the past is that, simply stated, we must not spend so much focus on feelings and behavior or positions. I'll talk about that in a minute. But on the perceptions and needs that give rise to those. You see what I'm saying? Feelings and behavior are side effects. They're byproducts. It's like a symptom. If you have pneumonia and you're coughing, I give you a cough syrup, you cough less. But the pneumonia is still there, right? You treat the pneumonia, what happens? Cough goes away. Now, initially, you may need cough syrup while you treat the pneumonia. But you see what I'm saying here, what I've found over all these years is that the feelings and the behaviors are clues to how people think. You can deal with how they think. It's a domino effect. The behavior and the feelings change. I have in here positions. Don't have time today to talk about positional negotiation in dispute resolution. But rather than deal with feelings and behavior, it talks about dealing with needs. And if everybody can sit down and talk about what we need, a lot of times there's positions or solutions that emerge, one of which we never thought of, that meets everybody's needs, right? Because if I'm positional, it meets my needs. I don't care about yours. If I'm needs-based, I want to know what you need too, because maybe we can both get what we need if we talk long enough, right? We can identify those needs. And that's what I learned in divorce mediation. When I would have two parents sitting there and I would say, I'm sure you love and care about your kids. What are they going to say? No. You want the best for them. You want to model behavior for them. You want them to invite you to your wedding when you're 30 years old, don't you? Well, yeah. Well, then let's figure this thing out. You all have the same needs. Same kind of thing what I found in business and industry. Whether it's a shift-to-shift issue or quality control versus engineering, everybody's this far apart. And how you deal with that difference either closes it or blows it wide open, okay? So that's what we want to be able to take a look at. A couple more things from research that I think are important. Back in 1994, Mike and I wrote our first book. And one of the things that we discovered kind of by accident was the quote here that we had this model of looking at beliefs at this, it was a hospital, looking at the beliefs, and if those could be changed, what would happen? And once the self-defeating perceptions and cultural roadblocks were identified, the employees were able to help define a new culture. And the new culture was what? A new shared set of beliefs. And that produced better results. Okay? It sounds easy. Obviously, it's not that easy. If this was that easy, I'd be digging ditches or welding cars or something. This is tough stuff, but it's not impossible. All right? After we did our research, the other guys, of course, came along after we did. But I think what they had to say was extremely important. There's a book called Change the Culture, Change the Game, and it's by Connors and Smith. And this was one of the things that they found is exactly what we found in working with business. If you change people's beliefs about how they do their daily work, this is kind of rhymes, and help them adopt new beliefs you want them to hold, you will produce actions you want them to take. Think about that, right? If you can help change people's beliefs about how they do their daily tasks at work, and they then adopt those beliefs, they will produce the actions you want them to take, okay? This is what I mean by what we started today, is how well we communicate. If we can communicate those beliefs, everybody buys into what the corporate culture is in your business. I don't care if you have 2 people or 200. If everybody buys in, then you get the actions you want them to take. One more way to take a look at it. Here's where we make our mistake. Okay, and this is what we learned many, many years ago. All too often, leaders attempt to change the way people act without changing the way they think. That's that outside-in change. I'm going to try to modify your behavior. I'm going to come in and say, this is what you're going to do. This is how you can do your job. And, and people are, you're going to walk out and they're going to, I don't think so. Right. So we really too often as leaders attempt to change the way people act without changing their beliefs. So here's the other rhyme. This is pretty good. As a result, you get compliance. That's what I said earlier, but you don't get commitment. You want commitment, not compliance. You want people buying in. You get involvement, but not investment. Big difference between being involved and being invested in your company, right? You get progress, things will move along, but you don't get lasting performance. I always say when I'm working with individual depression, anxiety, or self-esteem issues is we need to change that thinking so it becomes autopilot, right? So when something happens, I don't need to go back up here and say, what am I thinking? I already know. It goes right down to the feeling part and I act on it. Same kind of thing here. If I've got buy-in to the company mission, if I got buy-in to what we're doing, I've got all that, I'm invested, I'm looking at lasting performance. That's really the critical key. So getting a little tired of listening to myself talk. So just want to go over the model one more time. If you've got questions or whatever, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. But, really take a look at this because this model to me is extremely important. So again, it's not so much the activating event, the things that happen in our life, whether it's at home or at work or in our society, is how we interpret them that causes our feelings and our behavior. Bad things do happen, folks. We just experienced it. We know this. But I don't think it happens with the regularity that we see it. Okay? That's the choice we have. If traumatic events happen, we need to feel those feelings and then we need to try to be able to work our way out of it. When we take a look at things, you want to be able to take a look at those perceptions. You want to take a look about how you evaluate things. And again, this makes you fun of parties because now you know why other people feel and behave the way they do. You can see it. If somebody's on one of those emotional roller coasters, you're thinking, well, they're living the polarities. Somebody is always kind of doing that negative thing, they're awfulizing. If I'm going back and forth or I'm getting screwed to, let me apologize now for the mistakes in 2022, it's a self-esteem thing. You see what I'm saying? That gives you some good insight. So, and all that stuff goes ahead and drives our behavior. So, always love this picture. It was My in-laws have a place on the lake. This is where I wrote the book after 40 years, and I always loved that. So I'm more than happy if you got some questions or you want to say, I've had enough, I'm going to run out of here right now and go somewhere else. That's fine too. Here's my contact information. Give me a call, shoot me an email if you like. I'd be more than happy to answer, some questions or whatever. But hopefully you feel like it was worth your time. And what kind of questions or concerns do you have?
If there are any questions, please enter those in the chat if you would, so that we can make sure that we track those. While we're waiting for those questions, just a reminder that our next virtual classroom is next Thursday at 11, and that will be how to manage generational differences in the workplace. So that will be a very good topic. We'll also have virtual classrooms coming up in April and May. And also in May and June, we'll have evening classes coming up with QuickBooks, more human resources topics, social media, and also how to start a business in Illinois. Be sure to follow us, Rockford SBDC.org, Rockford Small Business Development Center.org, and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, Rockford SBDC. So it looks like we have a question for you, Norm, in the chat from Kelly Johnson. How is creating a neutral ground different than just making excuses for someone and allowing their toxic behavior to continue?
What we're taking a look at is the toxic behavior is secondary to a toxic belief system, okay? So it's not just accepting it for what it is, it's being able to confront not so much the behavior, but the thinking, okay? Because we can go, you remember the whole playground stuff, did to, did not, you're doing this, no, I'm not, it was their fault. We move all that stuff aside and just say, I gotta tell you, I'm concerned about you. The things that you're doing and your behaviors around here are not helping the group. And what you wanna do is get past those feelings of behavior and get to that belief system. What gives? I remember when things used to be better here, or, you've been here for a year and, you don't seem to be buying into what we're doing. So you want to get to the thoughts. The best way I can try to describe it is like karate. If somebody hits you with a feeling or behavior like the toxicity, boom, you knock it aside. You want to know why. That's the part where you want to be able to get to. If you can get up there and be able to influence that, the behavior changes. If you can't, then maybe this person needs to be somewhere else. Not everybody can be saved, I think people, if they're confronted more times than not, will go, I got some choices here. If they don't, and I'm fully justified the way I'm feeling and I'm behaving and it's toxic, maybe time to go. A great question though. Others.
Any other questions?
Kelly didn't turn green up or anything, so we're okay. That's a question.
If anyone wants to ask Norm outside of the chat, we have a little bit of time, but we do want to get you out before noon because I know the Rockford Chamber is also having a live stream. Are there any other questions? Yvette says, thank you very much.